Hey everybody, today is December 15th, so we'll be looking at December 14th MTG stocks. The first biggest price increase is a Izzet charm. It seems like a lot of money for a charm, but since we've gone over it, we'll kind of skip that one and we'll look at the others. Not too many price increases yet again. Not a huge amount of price decreases either, though. So, our first card that we'll look at is the Windfall. It went up about 50 cents to $1, about $4 now. This is a 2 colorless blue sorcery, and each player discards his or her hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way. So, this is pretty crazy, especially depending on what kind of deck you're going for. I think, like, if you are a deck that can afford to get rid of a lot of cards very quickly, Windfall's great, because I mean you're basically emptying out your hand, and then you're going to play Windfall, and other people will probably have more cards than you, depending, but I mean, still, this is a good way to get stuff out of people's hands or just refill your hand in general. And for free mana, that's pretty crazy. Now, what's interesting about this card is that apparently it is banned in, I think, Modern, I think Legacy, and it's restricted in Vintage, which was pretty crazy to me to think that this card was so heavily influenced basically on those metas. The fact that only Vintage can be restricted, and this isn't like an old card like Black Lotus or something. This is just, I think this is a newer card. Maybe. Could be wrong on that. But pretty crazy card. Legal in Commander still though, so you're good for that. Let's go ahead and go to the next one here, which is Fast Spawn. This is, I've seen this card before, and I know that it is also banned in Legacy, but I think it's actually not banned. I don't think it's even restricted in Vintage. And it's kind of interesting because this is also banned in Commander, so that's kind of like a weird thing that Vintage it's not restricted at all, but in Commander it's banned, but probably for good reason, because what it does is it costs green, it's an enchantment, and it says you may put as many lands into your play as you want each turn. They eroded it to on your turn. And Fastbound does 1 damage to you for every land beyond the first that you play in a single turn. So basically, the first land you play is normal, and then every land that after that you can play for 1 life. So if you had this in your opening hand, and then you had 3 or 4 other lands, you ramp up to 4 lands, and then you can play other things. I understand why in Commander this is banned. I'm still surprised about Vintage, but Vintage is a very fast format regardless, so maybe it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, it's pretty crazy card. I think it went up from like 14-ish to 15-ish dollars now. So I mean, it's not like super expensive, which seems pretty crazy considering how powerful it is. But I think it's just mainly for the whole fact that you can't really use it in many formats. If you could use a Commander, I bet this thing would shoot up to probably a good $50, $60 pretty quick, if not more. Let's go ahead and go to our next one. This was a price decrease here. This is a reserve list card, I believe. Let's go to make sure on that. Let's see, Elder Spawn, yeah, reserves list. See that it dropped about 80 cents. No big deal. This costs 4 colorless, blue, blue, blue. You summon a spawn. Elder Spawn cannot be blocked by red creatures. Sacrifice one of your islands near your upkeep, or does 6 damage to you and is buried. So pretty bad. I like these old cards though, because it's just like, why was this ever a thing? It feels like it. But you know, kind of in the old days when you have these cards, I don't know how popular this card was because I didn't play in those days that much, but it's interesting because this card was probably actually okay, or maybe even really good, depending. Only because it was a 6/6. And for blue, that's really good, I'd say, just considering the fact that blue doesn't have big creatures generally. But when you think of the downside, you're just like, oh, this is terrible. I mean, I guess if you're going against a red deck, a mono red deck, Elder Spawn's good because then you have a way to basically have unblockable, I guess. That's a 6/6. But you know, in those times, and I'm not sure exactly. I think during this time, there's probably not really like a huge standard modern anything like that. I think it's probably they're playing it in like a couple of formats, but I would say since Black Lotuses were more viable, are more obtainable and usable, then this was probably a little bit easier to get out because you know you put out a Black Lotus, you have 3 of the mana right there, then you need 4 colorless, so you could probably get this out to earn 2 or 3. The only problem would be is that you won't have a ton of islands. What's kind of weird is that I think this is like Coral Reef, so it kind of makes less sense to me why this is Elder Spawn. And I can't tell if this is supposed to be like he's inside the Coral Reef or if I'm just completely misreading this image. But interesting art. And then we'll go ahead and go to the next one, which is another price decrease. It says Ink Eyes Servant Oni. But it went down like $1.50-ish. I say ish because you never know, because it could be down to like $6 on some sites. It could just be $10 on some sites. It depends. But what this one does, it costs 4 colorless, black, legendary creature, rat ninja. So good for rat decks if you like rats. I wish I could make one, but rat decks are too expensive because a lot of the rat cards are very, very good. It is a 5/4. It has ninjutsu, which costs 3 black, and what it does is you can return an unblocked attacker you control to your hand. So basically, if you attack with something and no blockers were declared on it, you can pay this ninjutsu cost, and then what happens is you return that creature that was unblocked, put it back to your hand, and then you have this guy come out tapped and attacking. So pretty strong, depending especially on what kind of ninjutsus you have. Like Yuriko is pretty rough. But anyways, so it's not just summoning out a 5/4 and attacking, and of course it has another effect here, which is when it deals combat damage to a player, you may put target creature card from that player's graveyard into play under your control. So it is really, really good for stuff like if you're going against a dredge deck, that'd be really good. Or if you've just gotten rid of some of their creatures, this would be good potentially for like control decks, but I mean, mostly ninja decks or rat decks is what you're going for. Discard decks. That's probably where it really shines, those kind of 3 archetypes. But it is, and mill, of course, mill. But pretty crazy the fact that you put out a 1/1 unblockable. That's what I love. Like the Yuriko decks, I know there's like a cost blue and it's a 1/1 unblockable, which doesn't sound like much, but when you have ninjutsu, then it suddenly turns into a huge problem for your opponents. And then it has 1 black regenerate Ink Eyes. So not only is she good for that one-time effect, but then you also make her very hard to get rid of too. Put any kind of equipment like Death Touch on her, and she gets probably pretty annoying pretty quick. Then we'll go to our commander for the night, which is Grenzo the Dungeon Warden. I've seen this card before, and this isn't. I've talked about kind of like my 4-deck idea, and this isn't the commander for it. I'll reveal that probably more near the time when I actually make that deck. But this one will probably be inside it, which is he costs X, black, and red. He's a legendary creature, Goblin Rogue. He's a 2/2, and when it enters the battlefield, he enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. So you can either cast him as a 2/2 if you pay 0 for X, or if you put 5 into X and then black red, and that means he comes out with 5 +1/+1 counters and becomes a 7/7. And that part's actually important because his other ability is you pay 2, put the bottom card of your library into the graveyard. If it's a creature card with power less than or equal to Grenzo's power, put it on the battlefield. So this is pretty interesting. This could any kind of graveyard deck this could be good for regardless, because you're putting stuff in your graveyard if you don't get off his effect. But if you do get off his effect, then it's a huge swing for you because you're paying 2 mana to potentially put in a big creature, which is super nice. The other thing I like is that even if you aren't doing like, I mean, this would probably not be super mana efficient, but if you don't have like a ton of big creatures in your deck and you're playing like maybe a flashback deck, or if you're looking for specific cards, I think this would probably go better with potentially Grixis, or probably Grixis, just because blue helps you self mill, or lets you at least manipulate the bottom / top of your deck a little bit easier with like Scry. But then you can, with those kind of decks, you can have flashback or something, a lot of flashback spells. So even if you don't hit a creature, you're then putting spells into your graveyard. And then I think there are things that let you reduce your activated ability cost by like 1. So that way it only costs 1 to mill yourself, or potentially put a creature into play. So it's pretty interesting. I think it's a very cool card, and I think there's a lot of neat things you can do with it. Because I think people either do one of two things. They either manipulate the bottom of their deck so they get creatures out, or 2, they like to play roulette and they just start saying, oh, I'm going to pay 2. Do I get something? Nope. All right, just keep paying it. Which is not a bad way to go. Sort of, not really chaos, but sort of fun. Then, for our random card, we're going to be looking at Lotus Blossom. I'm a sucker for any kind of Lotus cards because, I don't know, I like the Black Lotus in general. It is a 2 colorless artifact. And during your upkeep, you may put a petal counter on Lotus Blossom. So, when it first comes out, it really doesn't do anything. But, so, you play it, nothing happens. Next turn comes around, your upkeep occurs, and then it puts a counter on it. And then, you can sacrifice Lotus Blossom, and you can add X mana of 1 color to your mana pool, where X is the number of petal counters on Lotus Blossom. Play it as a mana source. So, what's really good about this is, if you have specific decks, works really well. Because, if you're paying 2 mana to not get your return until, like, I guess it takes 2 turns to get your investment back. And when you look at things like talismans and etc., this is kind of like, this isn't great. It's not bad. I don't think it's like that bad. It's a couple of dollars, so it's not terrible. But I think this shines better in decks where you can really make those counters get beefed up. So as proliferate. I think there's artifacts where you can move counters to other things. I forget what it's called, but it's like it comes into play with 6 counters on it, and you can tap it, and you can basically increase the counter on another artifact. So when you start trying to manipulate those counters, you could probably pretty easily start getting like, 5-6 mana out of it pretty quickly. But of course, since it's a Lotus, you only get 1 of the same color. So it turns into like, it's probably better for mono decks, just because you are very limited to your mana pool on that. Dual colors is probably fine, but I think anything kind of beyond that dual, you start getting into risky situations, unless you have like an X deck where you're paying like X or something. Usually that's scroll, but regardless, I think it still has some pretty decent applications. I don't think it's going to be game breaking or anything, because even if you have to like proliferate or something, then it is kind of slow regardless. But I think like this is a good way to get a lot of mana pretty quick if you need it. I probably have a couple of things I could put this in, especially mono decks, I think. Because I think this helps mono decks quite a bit, because if you just need that one big mana push and you have it out early, it's pretty good. But if you get it late, it's probably really bad. And we'll go to our random cards of the night as usual to end it off. Random card number 1. Going to be Quirion Trailblazer. 3 colorless, green, Elf Scout. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land and put it on the battlefield tapped. If you do, shuffle your library. This is okay. It's not great. I think Wood Elves is the other one. The Wood Elves is 2 colorless and a green, and when it comes on the battlefield, you get to put a forest into play. I think it's untapped. Could be wrong on that. Well, this one it kind of helps a little bit if you're playing different colors than just mono green. But even then, I think I'd rather have Wood Elves because costing 1 less still gives you a body on the field if you need it for like sacrificing or blocking in general. But Quirion Trailblazer seems pretty slow. If it didn't come into play tapped, I'd probably be a little bit more lenient towards it, but it doesn't seem that great. And we'll go ahead and go to random card number 2 of the night, which is Cataclysm. 2 colorless, white, sorcery. Each player chooses from among the permanents they control an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a land. Then you sacrifice the rest. That's rough. What's interesting here is that, so you'll notice from the vault, this is like $3, then Exodus is like $6, and that's mostly because of Exodus being older, but also from the vault. I have bought a card from the vault once, like online as a single or something. Yeah, they feel pretty weird. They always feel fake, and I don't know if I like the quality of those very much, so that may be why they're cheaper as well, because they're all foil and stuff, but it's pretty weird. But regardless, this card is pretty nice. This is a good, very, very good board wipe, because if the opponent has very, very strong creatures, like indestructible creatures or something weird like that, then making them sacrifice all their creatures but one is probably pretty detrimental to them. You know, artifacts, enchantments as well. This is good if you're able to kind of keep one artifact, enchantment, or creature up. Like if you aren't doing super crazy, like you're not like specifically going into those archetypes, you're more balanced, I'd say. Balanced in the sense of, you know, you don't have like 40 creatures in your deck or something like that, like 40 artifacts, etc. This probably be better for you. But I still think it's a pretty good board wipe, because it hits everything, and sacrifices get rid of indestructible a little bit easier. Though I did just realize that it says and land, and that's where the hard part comes into play, because and land makes everybody hate you if you play it, because mass land destruction and etc. etc. I hope you all enjoy. Have a good one, and I'll see you next time.